Hey guys, so I thought I'd do a video update this time, be a little more interesting than just reading my blog. so um, we left off in Julian. I just hiked a 26-mile day and had hitched into Julian by this guy who was sort of a trail angel, and he drove a light blue Volkswagen van. You saw some of those photos probably. And he took a few of us into Julian. There was Bathroom Hugs, Shutter, Shelby, Relish, Animal, and myself. So you'll probably see that I refer to a lot of people as their trail names. I don't even know their names, their real names sometimes. And that happens a lot on the trail. I don't have a trail name yet, but I'm hoping to get one soon. It helps when you get to know people really well, because most good trail names come from people that you hike with. So I've become pretty good friends with several folks so far. This one guy, Bones, that I met at the kickoff event in Lake Morena, he's only section hiking, but he's become a good friend. He lives in Idyllwild, which is where I am right now. Then there's OG and Ross, these two guys who are hiking together, really solid guys. Bathroom Hugs, Shelby, Shutter, and Relish have been hiking together. Really interesting crew, really fun people. Let's see, an Animal. I hiked with Animal yesterday. Animal is a guy that's from Seattle who does kind of search and rescue as a volunteer. Really cool guy. Those are the main folks that I've been hanging out with so far. Anyway, so back to Julian. In Julian, once we got there, we had Mom's Pies. You saw the pictures of the receipt where we paid nothing for a sandwich, a drink, and amazing pie with ice cream. It's a really good example of what they call trail magic. People who you meet along the trail who really just treat hikers like gold, and it really makes the hike a lot better, because there's times when you're hiking a 26-mile day, for instance, and it's really hot and your feet feel so swollen. When you get to that town and people are so nice and so welcoming, it really lifts your spirits and helps you keep going. So anyway, Julian was great. I hung out in town for a couple of hours, and this is something I'm going to do more often in the desert hikes up through mile like 700. It gets so hot in the desert between 1 o'clock and 5 o'clock that it doesn't make sense to actually hike during that time. So I happened to hit Julian at the right time, and it made sense to go into town. I had to do my first hitchhike to get back from Julian to the trail, and I have to report that it was like a sign that I should be doing this, because I spent some time in the library at Julian, updating my blog. I got a shower from OG and Ross, who had a hotel room, and then I went to go hitch. I thought it might take a while to get a hitch, and I was on the road. Like 4 cars might have passed by, and this big truck stops. It was a very large truck, and window rolls down, and it's this woman, Jackie, who stops, and she said, "You can only get in if you stink." I said, I didn't want to admit that I had showered, but I was like, well, I'm a hiker. I'm a PCT through hiker, and she said, "Get on in." Jackie was amazing. She works for the sheriff's department in Julian, and she told me that every morning on her way into work, she looks for hikers to bring in, and when she goes back home, she looks for hikers to take back to the trail. So I felt really lucky that she had stopped. We had a great conversation in her truck on the way down. It was about a 13-mile drive, and she kept using the term partner in the truck when she was referring to her partner. And later on in the conversation, she mentioned a woman's name. I think it was Leslie, maybe. And I said, "Oh, is she your partner?" And the woman said, "Yes, she is." And I said, "Oh, I'm LGBT as well. I'm one of the family," and we really bonded over that. But I couldn't believe that my first hitchhike was, a woman who was LGBT as well, in the middle of nowhere. So it just felt like a sign, that this was really a good thing for me to be doing. I mean, there's been lots of signs, but that was certainly one of them. Anyway, Jackie dropped me back off at the trail, and I started hiking at about 6 o'clock, and it was still hot. It was a hot day. There was a good wind that kept me going, but about a half mile into the trail, I ran into this guy named Bipolar. He's a guy who's through hiked before, and he was hiking down the trail to meet up with hikers and help them with their blisters. He's somewhat of a nurse, so I ran into him. We had some conversations. He asked me if I was one of the many people that he was told about that were having major issues with their feet near Julian. And I said, no, I'm actually feeling pretty good. I've got one little blister, but I think I have it under control. We had a good conversation, about hiking, and he told me about his biggest fear right now was going to his daughter's wedding because she wanted him to shave. Anyway, kind of a side tangent there. So I hiked on, and not even a half mile later, my blister started acting up, and I thought to myself, why didn't I get some help from Bipolar? It would have been great to actually have him look at the blister, because it was really, really hurting. I think I mentioned before in one of my blog posts that my shoes that I brought for the trail were a bit small. They were size 11, which is what I usually wear at home. But everything I'd read said to buy a half or full size larger shoe for the hike because your feet swell. And I've got a lot of folks who have asked questions about that, about my feet growing, I think I had said before. Your feet don't actually grow, but they swell. And they swell wide and they swell long. And, it's really important that you have a shoe that can accommodate that. But that isn't so big that you move around too much as well. So, luckily, I knew I had sent, I'd already purchased a larger shoe, and I knew I could have it sent farther along the trail. So in Warner Spring, I think it was Mount Laguna, I had texted Bill and Bill, who are my resupply friends in San Francisco. I texted them and told them, I really need you guys to send me those shoes that I bought because the ones I have are too small. So I knew that they were on the way, but I had to keep my feet in good shape until I could get to those shoes. The shoes were being sent to Warner Springs, which is still 20-40 miles north of where I was. Anyway, here I am between Julian and my next stop, in a lot of pain, just trying to tend to my feet. And it made the 13-mile hike that night really hard. I was hiking alone, hiking in the dark, my feet were in pain. At about mile 87 and a half, which was about 10 miles into that hike, it was about 11 o'clock at night, one of the first scary things of the hike happened. I was hiking along by myself, late, and I look to the left of the trail, and I see these two eyes set far enough apart that it was probably a rather large animal, and I just to make sure it wasn't a rock, I kind of looked around different angles, and the eyes stayed still at first, and then I saw the eyes move. And I could then, at this point, see a very faint silhouette of a body, and it looked pretty large. And I knew it was some sort of animal. I didn't know what it was. I couldn't really see that well. It was too far away. So I threw a rock to see what would happen, and it didn't move. I threw another rock. It didn't move. I started yelling. It didn't move. And then I got a bunch of rocks, started throwing them and yelling really loud, and finally it turned almost leisurely and walked away. So I think it could have been a mountain lion. I don't know for sure, but it was scary. So from that point, I turned my headlamp was on at the time. I turned it from like a dim setting to a bright setting, and I started walking real fast. Even though my blister was really hurting still on the back of my right foot, I went real fast, and I made it to mile 90. And I felt a little safer. This is terrible, but I felt a little safer after I passed multiple tents along the way, and people sleeping. So who knows? Was it a mountain lion? I can't really tell for sure, but it was certainly scary. Mountain lions are not a big threat. They're typically more scared of you, um, especially because you're wearing a big pack and you look big and you have your hiking poles that you're hiking with, and you can make yourself look bigger by raising them up in the air, which is what you're supposed to do if you get into a situation with a mountain lion. But it was interesting. This was the first time where I questioned night hiking. Anyway, made it through the night. I hiked the next day down to a place called Barrel Springs, which is the midway point between the third gate checkpoint, which is the point that I got into that night, and Warner Springs. When I got to the Barrel Springs, there were a bunch of people there hanging out, trying to cool off the afternoon, and I had it in my head that if I could really go fast, I could make it to Warner Springs before the post office closed. And I was feeling good at this point, my feet weren't hurting that bad. And everyone was like, "You're crazy, you have 3 hours and you have to go 9 miles. But I thought, it's mostly downhill, and the topographic maps I was looking at didn't seem like it'd be that intense. So I set off at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was not a good choice because this guy Angry Bird and that's his trail name, Angry Bird. We both set off at about the same time, and he's a bit faster of a hiker, so he's ahead of me. But we're hiking, and maybe not even a mile away from Barrel Springs, we run into a herd of cows, that was just hiking along the trail, and there was no way to get around them because there was lots of desert scrub around that you couldn't get around them. And I had come into the back of the herd, but then there were more cows that came in behind me, so I was basically stuck inside the herd of cows, as was Angry Bird ahead of me. And we were just yelling things like get, so we could get them to move, and they kind of worked, and eventually after 25 minutes or so, most of them cleared off the trail. But it was quite an experience. It was a first for me. I wasn't really sure how friendly the cows would be, but they were more frightened of us than anything. It was kind of cool though, because Angry Bird and I end up realizing we weren't going to make it to Warner Springs in time to get to the post office, so we just kind of took a nap under this tree in the shade before continuing on. It was about 2:30 at that point, and when we did start hiking on, we crossed these beautiful fields, and we came to this meadow where there were these cows, another herd of cows, a different one, and we stood there, and these cows started just they went from acting as if they were minding their own business to the whole herd of cows, there's probably 50 of them, started just kind of closing in on us, really creeping in, because they were just really curious. And they came really close, and one of them licked my hand, and it was a really surreal moment. I didn't really know what was going on, but it was pretty cool. Anyway, then we moved on. We hiked into Warner Springs. I was so tired at that point. My feet hurt really bad. Just really, after 20 plus miles of hiking, the bottom of your feet, not from blisters, but just from the constant pressure of walking on your feet, they start to feel really sore and swollen. So I got into Warner Springs, and Warner Springs has a community center that is extremely welcoming of hikers. They do a breakfast for hikers in the morning with a small donation. They'll do laundry for a donation. They have a shower there. They'll let you camp out on the lawn for free. And there's a guy named Warner Springs Monty who's through hiked the PCT before, who gives people rides to the post office, and he lets some people stay at his house, which is incredibly generous. But I got in kind of late, around 6 p.m., so the community center was closed, but I got there and set up my tent. And then Angry Bird and I hitched a ride to a Mexican restaurant 8 miles up the road that we had heard about. And we were lucky to get a ride from this woman who is like the town school bus driver, who was pulling out across the street from where they park the buses. She gave us a ride and told us all about town politics, and it was really, really nice. Angry Bird and I then had an incredible dinner. We ordered, he ordered a burrito, I ordered enchiladas, and then we each got a pizza. My plan was to eat some of the pizza and then bring the rest back for hikers that weren't able to hitch in time or didn't have enough money to get food. So that's another thing about the hike so far that I've learned. A lot of the hikers that I'm hiking with just don't have a budget to eat out a lot or to get hotel rooms. I'm lucky enough to have that, and I have a job to go back to. Most people I've met don't. So so I try to help out when I can. Not go overboard, but get a little extra food, bring it back for people. Let folks use showers in my room when I get a hotel, things like that. But it's tough. It's tough to see the situations that some of these people are in. But at the same time, we're hiking this beautiful trail together, and most of those money troubles go away when you're a few miles into a beautiful hike. So there's that. Anyway, after I stayed at Warner Springs for about 20 hours before taking off, I needed a rest on my feet. Excuse me. So I head out the next day at 6 or a little bit, or maybe 5 or so, and with a goal of making it 6 or 7 miles to camp out, so that I could, make the next day's hike a little shorter. And I made it to a campground where there were a bunch of folks who had apparently had the same idea. I saw Shutter and Bathroom Hugs there, and Shelby and Relish and a bunch of those folks. Everyone was kind of already going to bed at that point. It was about 9:30, and I made myself a quick dinner. My dinners really consist of pouring hot boiling water into a bag of food that reconstitutes with hot water, but they're pretty tasty. So I made myself dinner and talked with Shutter for a little while. Shutter, by the way, he got his name because he's really good with cameras, and he's going to be showing me how to take better photos at night with my camera. He highly approves of the Sony RX100 Mark II that I bought. He says it's a really good camera to have for the trip, so that's encouraging. He has a Nex 6, which is also a Sony. It's more of a DSLR, but he says that for a compact camera, I pretty much got the one I should have for a trip like this. So that felt good. Yeah, so let's see. I camped out that night. I woke up, and my goal was to make it as far as possible to get to. There's a stop called, what is it? It's a Trail Angel's house, Mike Herrera's house. It's in the middle of nowhere. And so after Warner Springs, it's about like 20 some odd miles to get, maybe 25 miles to get there. So I knew I had to make it another 13 miles from this campsite to get to the stop midday. And I did, which was great. It worked out really well. I made it to Mike's place in the middle of the desert at about 10:30, maybe 11 o'clock in the morning. This trail angel has a house in the middle of the desert. He maintains a couple water tanks so that hikers can come in and refill their water in a place where there's no water available and where you really need it. He also treats you to barbecue chicken and to ice cream and beer and soda. It was amazing. It was a great place to take one of those midday siestas I was talking about, where between 12 and 5 you don't really want to be hiking. So a bunch of hikers started rolling in, and we all just hung out there for the afternoon. It was really great. Mike has this guy named Cushy who hangs out there and really tends to the hikers for Mike. And Cushy kind of walks around, like starts up conversations and talks about his through hikes that he's done, his art career that he's had. He's done some amazing artwork for all sorts of things. So it's a really cool experience. I had a really good time, and huge shout out to Mike and to Cushy for their hospitality. I left. I was one of the first people to leave though, because I'd been there for quite a while. So I left around 4:30, and my goal was to hike about 12 or 13 miles to get to a campsite, which is really just a place off a trail where there's flat ground for you to camp on. So I hiked out alone, and I did make it 13 miles, and it was a tough hike though, because a lot of up, and then followed by a lot of down. So there wasn't a lot of flat hiking. And by the end of the hike, my feet were really hurting, and it was probably around 10:30 where I made camp. But I did. Woke up, packed myself up, and at about 5:45, as I'm finishing packing up all my stuff, Animal walks up the trail. He had basically hiked and camped a little earlier on than I had, and so we decided to hike together for a while. And we had a great morning, and this was yesterday morning actually. But we were hoping that the fact that we got up early would mean that our hike would be cooler. Our goal was to get to a place called Paradise Cafe, which was about 12 or 13 miles down trail, and then hitchhike into Idyllwild. Because between Paradise and Cafe and Idyllwild, the trail's all burned out, so it's closed. So hikers have to hitch over to Idyllwild or take some weird alternate route, which isn't really official. So anyway, Animal and I were hiking together, and it seemed like it was getting hot early. And by 7:30, it was already really hot. The rest of the hike to get to Paradise Cafe was pretty tough. We went up to the top of this place called Tabletop Mountain, and then down to the bottom of this ravine. And the hike up out of that ravine was just a series of switchbacks, which just means the trail goes back and forth up the side of a steep grade, and they're usually pretty tough. And this one was really hard because it was probably 90 degrees by about 9:30 when we were there. We just hiked up, up, up. Thank goodness though, eventually I just kept my mind on eating a burger at the Paradise Cafe, which is one of the things it's famous for, and I just kept going, and eventually we made it, and I got that burger and I devoured it. And it was interesting. So Animal and I were there eating, our burgers, and this trail angel named Tom shows up, who is a guy who lives in Kennedy Meadows, which is kind of the place in the trail that's the introduction to the Sierras. He's been kind of hanging out along some of the main stops on the trail to get to know hikers. He was there, and he said to me, "Hey, looks like you finished your meal. Are you looking for a hitch into Idyllwild?" I said, "Yeah, I sure am." He points to the parking lot, and he goes, "That guy over there is leaving any minute. Why don't you go ask him if you can get a ride?" So I did, and the guy said, "Yeah, I'm totally happy to give you a ride. I'm glad I could help." This guy's name is Major Tom. He was taking a couple other hikers as well. Turns out he's also through hiking. He was taking a 0 day, which just means he's not hiking any miles that day, because he was from Idyllwild, and he decided to use his 0 day. Instead of resting like you normally do, he was going to shuttle people from Paradise Cafe to Idyllwild all day. I was just blown away at the generosity of this guy. In his car, he had little cans of Pringles and a big kind of one of those freezer bags. It's like a tote bag with the capability of keeping things cold. And he had a bunch of soda in there. It was just so nice. I didn't even have to wait for a ride. It was unbelievable. Anyway, I got into Idyllwild pretty early. I had called the Idyllwild Inn on the way there, and got the last room available. Apparently, this is a pretty popular weekend. So I decided to take a 0 day here, my first 0 day, and just to recover and make sure that my blisters are fully healed before I hike on. Just rest, because I've heard that in the beginning, if you hike too hard, too fast, and don't give yourself breaks, that you can really overstress some of your muscles, and even more so than muscles, your tendons and ligaments are really at risk. They say that your muscles develop pretty quickly on the trail, but your tendons and ligaments are what kind of suffer if you're not careful. So it's really important to rest. And I've gone pretty hard with a 26-mile day, a 25-mile day, a 23-mile day. Almost all my days have been 20+ miles, which is pretty aggressive for the start. In fact, they're saying that the people I'm hiking with, we're all kind of at the front of the PCT hiker pack right now. So I feel pretty confident that I can take a 0 day and be all right. And yeah, now I'm here in this room at the Idyllwild Inn. It was great, you know, when I got in last night. That guy Bones I was telling you about, who I met at kickoff, he lives in Idyllwild. He does, I think, front end design work. So we kind of geeked out a little bit when I met him at the kickoff, and we really got along well. Me coming from Google, him having a tech background. So he lives here, and he invited me to come and do some barbecuing with his buddy Chris, who lives here in town as well. And Chris's house was like unbelievable. It's on the side of this mountain, and we just barbecued some steak and drank some beers. They took me to a few bars out in the town. It was awesome. And they're gonna be brewing some beer today, so I'm gonna go hang out with them and bring some hikers with me. I think Shutter's gonna make it into town today, as well as OG and Ross, and a few others. Probably Bathroom Hugs, which, by the way, I still don't know why she got that name. I haven't asked. I'm not sure I want to. But her friend Shelby and Relish will probably be coming to town today too. Probably Animal as well. Anyway, so the whole crew will probably be here. I'll see if I can't get them to go either hang out at Bones' place or maybe even somewhere else in town. But maybe celebrate Cinco de Mayo a little early. I don't know. But anyway, yeah, things are going really well. In general, I've had some really tough moments, but I've had twice as many amazing moments. And also, I guess an update on the fundraising. We've had some great days. Again, our goal, my goal on this trip is to raise $20,000 for Edge Youth Leadership, to be matched by Google, which would match it to $40,000, which would allow us to pay for the entire year for the organization. And just to reiterate, the reason why I want to do that, I've been involved with the group for about 8 years, and we had some tough years during the recession where some of the people who volunteer put in a lot of their own money to keep it going. And I want to help make sure that we don't have to do that when we run into tough situations like that. So having a reserve fund to keep Edge Youth Leadership strong in those times is the goal here. And I'm pleased to say that since, you know, when I was in Julian and I checked the fundraising page, we were at about $14,000. We are at almost $19,000 now. We are almost to the goal. I'm probably going to set a stretch goal if we do make it to 24,000, because that is the amount that Google is willing to match, because we have four Googlers involved with the program, and we can each match 6,000. So I'll probably set a stretch goal of 24,000 if we make the 20,000. We have a couple weeks to do it. So if any of you haven't donated yet and you want to, now is the time. We really appreciate it. But it's going really well. I couldn't be happier with how much we've already raised and how generous you've already been. And it's not like there's just a few big donors. We have had some large donors, but there's over 150 people who donated to to Edge through this campaign, and I'm just really excited that so many of you from so many parts of my life have donated. People from high school I haven't seen in a long time. People from my fraternity, both my chapter and people from my fraternity that I've never met, in person, have donated. Folks from previous jobs, folks from my current job, family from all over the country. I just am overwhelmed by the amount of support and from all the places it's been coming. So thank you all so much for what you donated so far, and I hope you continue to follow along. If you have questions, even basic questions, what kind of things are my favorite things to eat, or how do you go to the bathroom on